Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. Today I'm joined by Luke Raven. He's the Senior AML Compliance Manager at Cabital. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Luke, well, thank you for taking the time. Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, Luke, before we go any deeper, the first question to ask you is what is Cabital, which is spelled like capital, but with a B? And, when did it begin operations? What are the features and benefits? What does it offer to its customers globally in 2022?
Sure. So Capital's the name of our company's brand. It's actually meant as obviously a bit of wordplay on the term capital, but where we replace the P with a B to reflect Bitcoin's role as the world's leading cryptocurrency. And similarly, our aspirations as a brand to be a leading cryptocurrency exchange. So this is also reflected in the bit part of the word capital.
Yeah.
It's a color which serves to emphasize Bitcoin's role and further distinguishes it from the word capital. In terms of what we do, we began our operations in May 2021. We offer individual customers a cryptocurrency exchange product. We call this Cabital Buy and Sell, and also separately a cryptocurrency-based deposits product, Cabital Earn, where customers can earn attractive returns of up to 12% on their deposits held with us. We also offer a service called Cabital Connect, which is a secure fiat on-ramp and off-ramp. Essentially, it's a gateway for cryptocurrency platforms. When crypto companies integrate with Cabital Connect, their users will have a high-quality service option to purchase top-tier cryptocurrencies at some very competitive rates. We recognize that crypto can be volatile, as observed from the wild price movements in recent months. And we think that consumers should carefully consider whether the cryptocurrency asset class as a whole is in line with their risk tolerance and financial objectives. For those who do consider these and want to move forward with crypto, we aim to make it accessible.
So, as it says on the Capital website, it's crypto investing without the crazy, which we have seen, as you said, prices fluctuating. So, you're the company's newest hire, just over a week or two in the job. So, what has it been like, especially given the inflation and war that the world is living through, to be joining a crypto company at this, crazy time?
Yeah, look, it's been fantastic so far. As you said, it's just my second week, but everyone is super helpful and friendly. I'm very impressed with the team that we've have together already, and I've been really relieved to join a company whose motto is explicitly anti-crazy, given the times that we live in. Wherever you look, basically at the moment, VUCA seems to be the order of the day. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And given the current inflationary environment that's been exacerbated with obviously the grave political situation in Europe, we're seeing a lot of it. It's everywhere. Cryptocurrency's been volatile, inflation's been unpredictable, FX and exchange rates are sort of crazy. Even the cost of commodities like grain and fuel have been all over the place. So especially in that context, it's been really great to join a company like Cabital.
I was just thinking of that song, "My name is Luca," and they should change it to "My name is Vuka." Somebody should redo that. Maybe I'll do it for this. I won't sing. I've got a terrible singing voice, but I might see if I can modify the lyrics. I remember doing that with when Apple launched their gold iPhone. I took the lyrics from Goldfinger and I turned it to Gold Ringer. And it's on the internet. You can find it. And I've had good fun, modifying those sort of things. But the next question is, you are in Australia, you're in Melbourne, and Cabital is, an overseas company. You can tell us where it's from in a second. But the question is, why did they hire Luke Raven? And your specialty is AML and CTF, which for those who don't know is anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism funding. So please tell us about your expertise in these areas. And obviously, although it seems obvious, but why is it so important in the world of finance, let alone cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled to be asked that question because AML CTF is something I'm really passionate about. Essentially, it's very important because it's all about protecting the integrity of our financial system. We aim to prevent criminals, terrorist financiers, and other bad actors from misusing Capital's products and services to finance crime or engage in and profit from other nefarious activities. So, yeah, as I stated, I'm very passionate about this. I've been in compliance and fighting financial crime in one way or another for about 13 years. I've dedicated my career to implementing compliance frameworks which adhere to legislative standards, monitoring compliance with these programs, and remediating shortfalls where necessary. Essentially, we want to ensure continuous development and uplift consistent with industry best practice. AML CTF concerns are really critical for any financial services business. As all financial services businesses, including cryptocurrency, businesses now, they're built on trust. We don't just need regulatory licenses to operate. We need regulatory licenses as well, of course, but we need a social license as well. And trust is really implicit in that social license. So trust by regulators, customers, business partners, banking partners to do the right thing and to comply with laws and regulations and act in good faith. Building trust in like such a nascent the crypto industry, it's a tall order. We've been, the industry has been mired by past abuses relating to illicit activities, drug monies, as well as get rich quick sort of schemes. And it was Warren Buffett that said it takes 20 years to build a reputation, 5 minutes to ruin it. So I would say that cryptocurrency businesses and all financial service businesses have to take AML CTF very seriously in order to build and maintain the high levels of trust that we need with various stakeholders and the broader community.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard a lot about AML and KYC, Know Your Customer, as I've written over the past few years about crypto. And for those who, wonder if they've heard something about this recently, I mean, as we're recording, there's some sort of inquiry going on into the various casinos in Australia, and there was corruption there. There always seems to be corruption in casinos. And, I've been hearing the terms, AML, Anti-Money Laundering, and KYC, Know Your Customer, in relation to those things on TV and the TV news. So these are terms that are, filtering down to the very mainstream.
Yeah, I love to see it. I mean, I think it's super important. I'd also say that we've sort of captured the minds of people with, television series like Breaking Bad, like Ozark. My favorite Netflix documentary series is called Dirty Money. It's part of the zeitgeist now, where people are aware of anti-money laundering, terrorist financing, and financial institutions' responsibilities to the community.
And look, I just mentioned the casinos, but do you have any other examples where finance businesses didn't get AML and CTF right and then suffered worrying consequences?
Yeah, look, there's lots. There's so many examples of businesses that haven't taken their AML obligations really seriously. In Australia, for instance, you did mention already Austrac looking into the gambling sector. They've been very active in the last 5 years, and they've achieved some really landmark victories against big banks as well. So there's been over $2 billion of penalties levied. There's been a lot of reputational damage and more than one CEO resignation. It's pretty impressive when you consider where we were just 10 years ago, where if you were to mention AML to someone on the street, they wouldn't know what the hell it meant. And it's made AML compliance one of the big focus areas for firms in Australia. But there's also international examples. Some of the major international banks have been mired in controversies around this stuff too. If you ask my opinion, Australian and global AML regulators, they're not done, and this is good news, generally speaking. But the thing with AML, it's really easy to get wrong. And once you start down that path, or you have poor foundations or a misunderstanding or a legacy issue, it's incredibly difficult to course correct. So it's tempting to cast aspersions and tell you horror stories about like firms that have come before, which your viewers can easily Google anyway. But I really don't think it's warranted. What I reckon is we're best served if we don't think of it as my financial institution versus your financial institution versus that product versus this product. When it comes to things like financial crime, I think we're best served by thinking of ourselves as a united front. It shouldn't be, bank A versus bank B, or crypto provider A versus crypto provider B, or anybody against the regulators. It's really got to be financial institutions with other financial institutions and regulators and law enforcement against crime.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so where was Cabital based again? What's its home?
We've got offices. We've got offices in a lot of places. We've got, I believe, in Shanghai, in Singapore, Hong Kong. Obviously, we've got a Lithuanian. We're operating and onboarding customers in Lithuania. So, yeah, we have ops sort of all over the place and various sort of. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of glossing over this one because I'm still new to the company, so I'm trying to figure out where everyone sits.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, I mean, that was sort of a bit of a question I noticed, but it's linking into my next question, which is that, is Cabital going to market itself more actively in Australia now that it has you here? More obviously in the AML and CTF side of things and in marketing, but even so, and also the region, now that it's got its first Australian employee, or are you actually joining others who are already here and working hard?
No, you had it right. I'm the first boots on the ground in Australia. Our first priority is compliance. I think it speaks really well for the company that their first hire in this market is compliance, because it's not easy, as I said, to get right. And so we need to first be registered. We're not currently operating in Australia, of course, because we haven't got that yet. So we're going to be registering and getting on board as a digital currency exchange business with Austrac. Once that's been completed, we're going to work towards localizing our existing product, making sure that, of course, all of the business activities that we're going to conduct are in line with both regulatory expectations, but also the user experience is in line with what the local market expects. Australia is a big market. There's a lot of demand for our services here, but the average Australian is quite sophisticated and has a lot of offerings already. So we need to make sure that we tailor our experience. And that way, once we're sure we're compliant and our offering is something that Aussies are absolutely going to love, we'll be ramping up our marketing here for sure.
Yeah. And look, you're already obviously operating globally. Cabital offers or advertises a 12% interest rate. I mean, I've heard of some crypto companies offering 17%, and there's all these different rates. But, with normal interest rates so low, even though they're now starting to spike, how do cryptocurrencies manage to pay such a high interest rate?
It's a great question. It's one I wondered myself. I do have to jump in and say we don't advertise that in Australia just yet, of course, because we're not licensed here. But yeah, that is part of our offering abroad, of course. Crypto companies, typically, they lend out crypto-denominated deposits on decentralized lending platforms where borrowers are able to obtain loans by putting up collaterals. To give you like a parallel in traditional finance, it's kind of like margin financing in the securities industry, where the amount of credit granted is pegged as a percentage of the value of the securities, so your loan to valuation. Crypto companies are able to offer high interest rates to their customers as the borrowing rate on decentralized lending platforms is high. And this is because they're very short-term in nature. So they're usually for things like liquidity needed for crypto traders. And that's essentially it. That's the secret sauce of how crypto exchanges are able to offer such competitive rates in low interest rate environments.
Yeah, and obviously the various crypto companies are competing. Some will offer more, some will offer less. But it's always good that if you're offering a bit too high, there's instability there, and somewhere nicely in the middle, it makes you feel a bit more safer about your investment.
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said, crypto without the crazy, that's our motto, right? I agree with your take there.
Absolutely. So what is Cabital's view on various governments working to create their own national digital cryptocurrencies? We've heard a lot about this recently. What will this mean for all of the decentralized crypto out there?
So Cabital welcome this move. For sure. It strengthens the underlying use case and credibility of cryptocurrencies as a viable asset class. And I think it really underlines this idea that crypto isn't a flash in the pan. It's solving key issues associated with traditional financial services. Some of these issues are things like transaction fees and lead time, especially needed the lead times that's needed for cross-border payments to be effected. So more importantly, though, than that, by going ahead with developing their own national digital currencies, central banks will be able to validate the secure and transparent blockchain technology that cryptocurrencies rely on and are built with. And that should, give traditional financial institutions such as banks and the general public a greater sense of appreciation on how this technology functions and confidence about its security, essentially. As a whole, it'll definitely serve, we think, to elevate public interest and understanding of the cryptocurrency industry, which should only open more opportunities for collaboration and partnership for great companies such as ours, Cabital.
And what do you think the Australian government's stance and attitude is towards crypto?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the thing with regulations and regulators is that they do sometimes struggle to keep up with the times, even for average products.
Yeah.
And it's a function of them being laws, essentially. So, and that's always the case, but it's exacerbated when you look at something as unique and novel as crypto. The current regulatory regime in Australia, in some regards, is clear. So a lot of the time it's sort of criticized for being unclear, but one part that I think is very clear is the treatment of digital currency exchanges for the purposes of AML and conducting KYC. That happens with the guidance and support of Austrac, and we're very lucky to have that sort of engagement. There is, though, an open question about how other laws, other regulators intersect with crypto. And businesses who offer crypto exchange and custodial services, for instance, how they're supposed to be treated under other laws. There's a question as to whether or not these constitute offering a financial product that requires a license, noting that AUSTRAC, the AML regulator, they don't grant licenses per se. And so this is the present state. But the great news is that the government is recognizing the need to grow and adapt. In December last year, the Senate Select Committee on Australia as a Financial and Technology Centre concluded its review and issued several recommendations. And the government's now going further to clarify the regulatory treatment of crypto. So just, I think, 2.5 weeks ago, the Department of the Treasury announced that they've begun a consultation on crypto asset secondary service providers. Personally, I prefer digital currency exchanges, but the scope is broader. And they want to discuss licensing and custody requirements. There's several proposals and options that are outlined, which the government seeks feedback on and to potentially implement in order to simplify the regulatory treatment of crypto businesses in Australia. And Cabital, along with, I'm sure, many other impacted businesses, will be making a submission in response. For us, this is a really exciting time, and for the industry generally. It's great to see governments embracing crypto and really leaning into the challenge and the opportunity that it presents for innovation.
So what do you make of the perception that crypto is high risk, for money laundering, for fraud, and the topic of the moment, sanctions evasion?
Yeah, very topical. I've seen a lot of discussion about this recently. Look, crypto without the crazy, there's no two ways about it. The inherent risk of crypto for money laundering and other financial crimes is high. The perception is not wrong. But when I say inherent risk, this means a very specific thing that sometimes people forget to talk about or really dive in on. It's the risk basically that the product presents and the technology presents if you never take any actions to lessen or mitigate the risk. Basically, it's a measure of how attractive and useful it is for the criminal element. And the idea, this underpins a lot of AML regimes, is that first you need to understand your inherent risk and then take a very imaginatively named, risk-based approach. So that really underpins a lot of regulation. First, you need to be informed before you can start mitigating. So essentially, the perception is correct, but it's only half the conversation. There's a lot of financial services that are high risk. Many fintechs are seen as high risk, as are international remitters, basically as a standard sort of proposition. They're all considered to be high risk. And the thing with all of these services, crypto included, is that they're tremendously useful. So the risks are able to be successfully managed, and they're also worth managing. What's unique about crypto, I would say, is that the tools and techniques that can be brought to bear, both by firms like ours and law enforcement, to actually track funds through the blockchain, they enable transparency and visibility of funds flows on a whole new level. So although our inherent risks may be high, with the use of technology, we're actually able to mitigate our risks very well as a sector, I would say. The last thing I'd note is that, as you asked me before about examples of firms that haven't taken AML seriously enough, it's not as though money laundering doesn't happen anyway, and it's not as though all of those breaches came from these industries which are traditionally, recognized as high risk. They're typically from very large, complex traditional institutions. And we still all recognize the need for those institutions to exist. So essentially, I think it's a concluded conversation. Yes, it's high risk. What else? We need to mitigate them. A product as exciting as crypto really shouldn't be avoided just on the basis that its inherent risks are high, without a lot more further consideration, because it's only a small part of the picture.
So can you give some tips to our audience on protecting themselves from scams and securing themselves online? Yes,
absolutely. One of my favorite topics. I think that we've all noticed over COVID, there's been basically a secondary pandemic, and the pandemic of phishing emails, unsolicited texts, scams on online marketplaces, everywhere you look, dating apps, social media. It's really unfortunate, but catastrophes really bring out opportunities for criminals, and they are opportunistic. They want to part you and your money, and they've certainly taken advantage of COVID and this new highly digital world that many of us find ourselves in.
I was going to say that, in one of those Batman movies, I talked about how chaos is a ladder. And, how the bad guys always do well in terms of recessions. And, the most recent scam that I've seen, and it just came through my spam folder the other day, was about how there's a company that's like, oh, we've been scammed. We know what it's like to lose money, so we're here to help you get your money back. And it's like, are you guys for real? You know, you're trying to scam us to help us get the money back that we've been scammed on. So those scammers will try anything. I mean, they just
absolutely will. That's not an uncommon scam at all to follow, because you already kind of have. It's kind of like, you know, cold calling as opposed to a warm sales lead. You already know that person's susceptible. They're in a vulnerable state. They're wanting to trust someone. They're emotionally invested in what you're telling them being true. It's very sad, but unfortunately, it happens so much. Yeah. So sorry. With that in mind, I have some tips.
yeah. So I interrupted you.
No, not at all. Actually, you delighted me because you made a Batman reference, and that's one of my favorites. So, but the tips I'd love to offer your viewers, they're not like revolutionary or anything. Essentially, they're you know, I find them to be 3 tips that are really strong, and they cover just a lot of your bases. Because you'd be hard pressed to find a scam that doesn't rely on one or another aspect of this and wouldn't be somehow mitigated. So the first tip is, nobody for any reason is going to entrust you with money if you've never met them face to face and you don't know them. A lot of scams start from this position of like second guessing the victim, having whether the victim has trust, because it starts from a position of someone vulnerable supposedly putting trust in you. Basically, if it sounds too good to be true, it most definitely is. And trust is, you know, everyone talks about trustless when it comes to crypto, but you really need to make sure that you trust the sources of money that you're about to receive, or, you know, information that you're receiving, because there are many bad actors on the, you know, in the deep dark world of the internet. Secondly, don't click any links, don't initiate contact. I know this is super basic stuff, but I've actually seen a lot of people saying it's fun and funny to waste scammers' time and to engage when you get that phone call. It may well be, in fact, I know it is, but you should resist that temptation unless you're an expert, because you don't realize it, but you're actually still exposing yourself to risk. It talks a little bit about like a cold as opposed to a warm lead earlier. You've let them know that there's someone on the end of that phone number, that email address is monitored. You know, they can solicit a response. Maybe they just need to refine their attempt next time. So don't do that. Like, don't make their lives easier. Trust me, they don't care if you, like, they'll get angry, but they're still going to move on and scam the next person. So don't do that. Just block that phone number, block that social media account. You know, send that email phishing attempt to your, you know, report it, put it in the bin, send it to your company's IT security department if it made it through your filters. Move on with your day. And then lastly, and this applies especially to emails you receive at work, you should always do an offline verification of something strange that comes through. So whether someone contacts you, and it does occur in your personal life as well. So someone might contact you claiming to be a loved family member in a crisis, and, you know, they've lost their phone and they're contacting you and they need $1,000 to get out. You know, they're being held hostage, or they need posted bail and this sort of thing. You also might get an email at work that seems, you know, fine at first, but it could be the CEO asking for urgent assistance with an errand and your discretion with running the errand. These are definitely fraud. And the tip for getting around them, it costs no real time or effort at all. I mean, you just need to sort of think and take a step back from the emotional aspect of it. And it takes nothing to pick up the phone. Basically, perform 2-factor authentication, right? Like, you've got an email, go and call them, go and talk to the person, say to a colleague, hey, does this seem right to you? Because so many of the scams that I've dealt with in my time and the victims of scams, if they had heeded the advice and sought the advice of someone else or contacted the person directly, the whole thing could have been avoided. Save yourself the money and the embarrassment, and, you know, it can be really devastating. So yeah, just stay safe out there.
Yeah, and don't use any of the information in that email to, if there's a number there, don't ring it. I mean, ring the number of the company itself, look it up on Google or the white pages or yellow pages, the old-fashioned way if you need to. I mean, check, don't rely on anything that's in that message, because it's likely to be just as much of a scam. You know, I've had people call me and I can hear alarms going off in the background, and there's something on their computer telling them, you got to ring right now, here's the number from Microsoft, and it's a 1-800 number. And I just tell them, just push, you know, Alt F4 or Control F4, Alt F4 to close the window. And the window's closed and the alarm stops, and they're amazed that it's so easy. I mean, luckily in that case, it wasn't ransomware. It was so easy. And, yeah, it's amazing how easily people are scammed. and how it snowballs. And sometimes just the embarrassment is what stops people from seeking further help, and they get deeper and deeper in the hole until suddenly there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone out the door to some scammer in wherever the hell they are. So
yeah. Absolutely, it's super sad, and there's no need to be embarrassed as well. Just because you've been taken in once, there's resources online to help you. And I think what you mentioned earlier was a really great point. If someone contacts you, you post on Reddit and say, "Hey, this happened to me. Is this a scam?" Someone contacts you offering to get your money back, it's also a scam. It's just, yeah, it's terrible. But what can you do?
Now, Luke, you mentioned that you've been doing this for 13 years. So what is a bit about your own history in the world of tech? And, what got you interested in the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing side of things? I mean, it's a pretty specific area to get involved in.
It sure is. So actually, it's very topical from our last question. I actually started in fraud prevention. So I haven't been in AML for my entire career. I've served, in AML, fraud prevention, KYC, sanctions, lots of different, fraud in various respects. So I actually started in an after-hours team of a major bank in Melbourne. I quickly fell in love with the job description because the idea to me was that it was basically like puzzle work. Puzzles really piqued my interest, and I can't stand not knowing. So initially, that's why I applied for a role like that. I wanted to unpick the puzzle of transaction activity, and in my mind, I was like, "Oh, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy?" Now, that's definitely why I applied. I'm actually the first to admit that it was a pretty naive and clinical view. It fell away really quickly as my primary way of thinking. Of course, it's still interesting, but it wasn't what motivated me, because I distinctly remember the first time I spoke to an older person who was in a vulnerable financial position. She'd had her accounts compromised and her funds drained. She had fraudulent charges everywhere. They drained all of her money, and this lady's heart was breaking. And I was on the phone to her, and with her heart, my heart was breaking. So I still remember that so many years later. So experiences like that really sort of shaped me. And I came to really value the idea of doing actual good. So protecting customers from loss. Then I got the opportunity to move into sanctions and AML. And you have to sort of change your mindset. You're still trying to find fraud sometimes, but you're not really looking for victims per se. You do help them, but you're actually looking for the bad guys. And this was super fulfilling for me, especially having that initial start to my career, connecting with victims. Because the other side of the equation of protecting customers is actually attacking, or, attacking might be a strong word, but essentially like ruining the day of people who might take advantage of them, giving information on those people to the police so they can go and do their thing. Nothing makes me happier than that. So essentially, that's how I've shaped my career. I started at banks doing that, and then fintech revolution taking over is fantastic. I quite like the banks still, but fintechs are amazing to work at, and I still find it fascinating all these years later. Whether you're a traditional player or a fintech, you're going to have bad actors trying to exploit your customers and attack you and use you for ill deeds, essentially. I'm really lucky that I fell into this, because I still sort of bound out of bed every day, so to speak. And I always think of two things, like, how am I going to help our good customers? And how can I ensure that me and my employer are basically a thorn in the side of the bad guys, and really helping law enforcement and intelligence gathering. So yeah, that's how I've sort of developed and fallen into this thing. And it's a niche that I love, and I really don't see myself ever leaving it.
It's interesting when you talked about, things were a puzzle, you're trying to figure the puzzle out. I don't know if this is apocryphal, but I read, years ago that Einstein wasn't really a big fan of mathematics until his math teacher explained to him that each math was like a puzzle, and he had to be the detective to figure out the solution to the problem. And when he gave him that perception shift, that changed everything. And suddenly, math was interesting because he wanted to find out what the answer was. And of course, he ended up being one of the world's greatest mathematical geniuses and scientific geniuses. So sort of made me think of that as you're telling me about trying to be, find the answers to these puzzles. And yeah, I mean, that's going back to Batman. I mean, he's always trying to, find solutions. And without any kind of superpowers. I mean, he had all sorts of fancy gadgets, but he had to use his brain, and that's probably the biggest challenge of them all.
Well, you made my day by comparing me firstly to Einstein and then to Batman. So thank you so much.
Well, look, from the past to the future, how do you see crypto evolving over the next few years? What might the landscape look like in the 2030s when everyone is running around with AR glasses and we're all, swimming through the metaverse?
I still want my hoverboard that was promised to me from Back to the Future. Yeah, look, I have a more moderate view than most people you might interview on this topic. I don't see crypto displacing other finance over such a short time frame. We're talking about 7 or 8 years, right? It's pretty integral to governments that the economy is well managed and that they've got the tools to influence that. And one of those main tools is monetary policy. So I really don't see crypto ever fully replacing this. However, that said, governments are getting on board, especially considering the renewed interest in central bank digital currencies, which we sort of spoke about earlier. The reason for this, I think, is the incredible appeal that the sector has for the public. So anyone that's expecting crypto, and you will find people that will hypothesize that crypto is going to explode, it's going to disappear, it's going to be a catastrophe. I don't buy into that either. I think that it's not necessarily going to completely displace the dollar, but it's here to stay. Aside from Australian government's consultation, which we spoke about, we also have some really interesting announcements from the UK and the USA just in the last few weeks, which seem to indicate that the interest in crypto has made it a priority to get right and to welcome. So all of that said, I think it's going to increase in popularity. We're going to see it become more and more accepted. Whether as a medium of exchange or as an investment vehicle, it's unclear. Or even in a myriad of other sort of novel use cases that are still emerging as Web3 sort of emerges and takes form. Crypto is going to take up a higher wallet share, a higher mind share. Skepticism around the industry is not going anywhere either, but it'll probably fade as adoption ramps up and it becomes mainstream and mature. And businesses like Cabital come to the fore. Even though I'm saying this is a prediction, a lot of this I see we're moving towards now. And, things don't move that quickly, even in sort of fintech land, but we're certainly laying the foundations for it. So I feel like it's a pretty safe prediction that I'm giving you here. Sorry.
So my second last question is, what's some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today?
That's a great question. My favorite advice that I give to anyone, and someone gave to me early in my career, is to be curious. Don't accept doing things just because it's always been done that way. Instead, try to understand what's being achieved. Even if what you're achieving is, for instance, regulatory compliance, right? That's not the goal. You've got to try to understand and engage with what the regulation is trying to achieve. Innovation is possible in all aspects, including compliance. But you can't really start thinking about changing the status quo or changing the how until you really deeply understand the why. What's being achieved. This is the core skill. I think anyone in a compliance-related field, whether it's finance or anywhere, and even non-compliance professionals should really aim to cultivate, because I think it's really the only constant is change, and being able to actually understand the underlying causes for things allows you to innovate. I say that's the most important thing for compliance folk. I think that's saying a lot because we have to wear a lot of hats to be good at our jobs already. But I really do think that being curious and bringing healthy curiosity to each conversation is super, super important.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was Isaac Asimov who talked about scientists, and he said the most interesting of discoveries is when people go, that's funny. And it was Einstein who spoke about how curiosity and imagination are two of the most important things when it comes to just life and thinking and all the rest. So yeah, being very curious is definitely an excellent quality and great advice. So my final question is, what is your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers and to your current and future customers and partners?
Absolutely. Watch this space. I think even though the world's kind of crazy right now, there's a lot of good things happening out there as well. A lot of really exciting technologies, new ways of doing business, business models emerging. We sort of touched on earlier this idea of inherent risks, and some of this new landscape does present challenges and risks that we have to move through. But I really strongly advocate for bringing an open mind and approaching these things with a growth mindset, essentially. Just because there's risks doesn't mean that they can't be managed responsibly, and just because it's changed doesn't mean it's bad. So as I said, watch this space. Please follow the Cabital journey by following us on LinkedIn. We will let you know when our Australian business is launching, and we're all super excited to bring Cabital down under.
Well, Luke Raven, the Senior AML Compliance Manager at Cabital, thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best of success for the future and hope you launch soon. And I hope we can talk again soon as well.
I hope so too, Alex. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.